All right, thank you for attending the webinar today of Building Your Fall Fertilizer Program. I am your host for the day, Rob McCoy, and I have the fortunate opportunity to work with a lot of lawn care companies and landscape companies throughout the United States and actually North America on their programs and kind of different strategies that they look at and can pull from my previous experience, having built and sold 2 lawn care companies, what worked for us, what's working for everyone now, and be able to give you some guidelines on making sure that this fall season is successful for you. A couple of things before we jump into the disclaimers. If you have any questions as we go along, there's a chat box. You can either put the questions into the questions section or the chat box, and we'll be able to answer those at the end. Hopefully, we will have answered them all as we go along, but that is usually not the case. This is a little bit different each time that I do it, so I don't know what I'll forget this time. The other thing is, if you are getting a little overwhelmed as you're going through this and you're wondering, all right, so I have a unique situation and you want to schedule a call, there will be a link on the follow-up email to set up a Calendly call. So you basically just fit or pick what fits into your schedule, and I'll give you a call then, and we'll be able to tailor your fall program to exactly what your needs are. So, as I mentioned, there's some disclaimers here. We are going to, whenever you're doing a program, you're assuming that you're going to have normal weather patterns. Some things like armyworms could be a weather effect. You could have a drought situation. You could have flooding. You could have extreme humidity. We can always make changes on the fly. You want to leave that flexibility in your program, but when you're trying to build a program, you have to assume that things are going to go as normal, which is usually abnormal. You also have to assume that applications are going to get done correctly. So calibration, training, different things like that have to be accounted for. Soil testing will give you some direction. Sometimes the soil tests are limited in scope, so you can't completely rely on them, but they do give you some direction. And as I kind of mentioned before, this can't be specific to your region because there's a bunch of different people from different regions on the webinar. So if you want to have something tailored to specifically what you're doing, then I would suggest to schedule some time, and we'll make sure that we get you set up. And the last point is about doing just that. So a little overview. We're going to go over what questions to focus on because a lot of this is recon, the process, and then building the program, and then we'll go into the Q&A session. So some questions to ask before you get started. If you're not sure what's happening with the soil, I would recommend going out and getting some soil tests, randomly pick some customers in different areas, just so that you can see if there's any consistency in the lawns that you're treating throughout your routes. If you have 500 customers, you may want to go do 10 soil tests in random locations just to understand, all right, well, we're consistently low in potassium, so we may need to adjust for that as we go into the fall season, so that we can maximize the results in the fall season and going into next year. You never want to be in a deficit going into the following year. So as much as you can do corrective work in the fall, that's the time to do it. What applications have provided the best or worst results in the past? You can often look at the history of your service calls, and even the call volume that you get. Were we planning on doing the same application? Because in that application, we tend to have more weed pressure, and we were only doing a spot treatment for weed control. Maybe you need to go to a blanket weed control for that application so that you avoid all the service calls and avoid doing 3 different spot treatments for weeds throughout the fall season. So something to keep in mind. Same thing with your cancel requests. If you have people that are requesting to cancel service at the end of your summer months because that's where you're going to get the worst results, how are you going to combat that coming out of the summer? How are you going to bring that? Say you were in a drought situation, how are you going to bring that grass out of dormancy and focus the nutrients properly and other products properly in order to accomplish a result that is going to avoid that cancel request? One of the things that I personally like to focus on is how am I going to get referrals and when can I get referrals? So I tend to look at the program as my best referral source. So when's the best time for me to ask for it, because I know the results are going to be good. I know that we're still in season and people are thinking about it. People are out on their lawns, and we can provide a better result than the competition. That's when you want to ask for a referral and make sure that you capitalize on that. And what are your business growth plans? Are you trying to gain customers? Are you trying to retain customers? Are you trying to do both? Do you have a certain amount of growth that you want to accomplish? Make sure that that's put into the process and figured into the applications, because going back to that referral question, if you have certain growth plans, referrals are the best way to get the growth for multiple reasons. One, it's not that it's free marketing, but it does revolve around the idea that you will build customer loyalty if your customers are the ones helping you grow. So they're going to be less likely to cancel. They're going to be less likely to complain. The other thing is, if you're able to acquire neighbors of current customers, it's a much more profitable customer and easier to service. So we want to avoid drive time at all costs. This is a great way to avoid drive time. So I used to really focus a lot on the second application of the year and what would be our 5th application of the year as the 2 points where we were going after referrals like crazy. And because that was when we could maximize on it the most. The real question is, how do I gain or retain the most business? And we're gonna dive into that a little bit more, and keep that in the back of your mind as you're setting this up. How do I gain or retain the most business as I'm building this fall program? So the application building process, and this is a holistic view. You want to look at the nutrients, the weed controls, any soil components that could be missing. That it could be the minors that you're looking at. It could be your pH levels off, things along those lines. Seasonal pressure. Say that you're still dealing with high humidity and you're getting disease pressure. That could be insect pressure. It could even be, it depends on the circumstances, but based on certain turf types, it could be showing a lot of wear and tear at this point. Your application methods and your budget. So we want to consider all those different things when we're going through this process, and we're going to come back to that to build really in that order, and kind of put the program together. Now, everybody has a different number of applications that are left for their fall program. In different parts of the country, you're going to have a different length of season. Different companies prefer different amounts of applications. So again, you're going to have to, put this in your scope as to what's going to make sense for you. One of the other things that I'd like to do is prioritize the applications based on that gain or retain. So this is an example of how I would weight our applications when I was talking about our fall program. So we would be basically in round 4 right now. And I'm considering that, that's our prep for the fall timeline. And what I mean by that is if there's still weeds hanging around or anything like that, I have to make sure that I have everything taken care of so that I can make progress in round 5 and in round 6. So that that's also when the customers are going to see progress, and that's when I can ask for my referrals as well. So you can see that round 5, that's a much more weighted application because that's when we can gain. That's when we're going to ask for the referrals. We're going to be making progress at that time. So if we're looking at the budget as well, I'm going to apply more of the budget to round 5 than I am on any of these other applications. So that's why it's important to prioritize not only the money that's going to go into it, but your efforts that are going to go into it as well. Because as much as everybody would like to say like, hey, we have consistent effort all year long, it may be that, yeah, applications get done the same way, but it might be different focus. And that can be translated into that. And we want to make sure that if we're going to be zeroed in and we're going to, as managers, we're going to follow up we're going to have very diligent follow up in round 5, because that's where we have the most benefit possibilities. And then round 6 is where I'm focused on retaining customers. Not that I'm not always focused on retaining customers, but you want to make sure that you do have a point where you are putting the spotlight on the current customers that you have. So how's that different than the gain? Well, if you're sending out prepay letters, I would typically send out my prepay letters for the following season in the second to last application. Why do I do it then? And a lot of people think that that's extremely early. The reason I like doing it at that point in time is because from the customer's perspective, and we always have to think of this from the customer's perspective, they're still your customer at this point in time. After they get their round 7 application, they're kind of like free agents. Even though the service rolls over from one year to the next, if they're going to switch service and not feel guilty about it, it's going to be when the season's done. So I want them to still be in a regular payment pattern, a regular application pattern, and that's when we're going to focus on this is what your prepaid discount's going to be for the next year. You can sign up for service now. This is going to be your biggest discount opportunity. And on top of that, remember what we talked about about a month ago with referrals. You can actually knock down your prepay amount for next year if you're able to refer us customers. So it's kind of a second wave of referrals where they can see and translate the exact benefit for the following season by chopping down their prepay by getting you neighbors of theirs. And again, I like it because we're in mid-season. The other thing that it flushes out is, and you can't be afraid to do this. If somebody's thinking about stopping the service at the end of the season, they're probably going to tell you at that point in time because you're asking for more service. You want to know then, while you can still do a few things and not in round 7 or after that, where your hands are a little bit tied agronomically as to what results you can get. Because if the season has cooled down in round 7 and they just lived with weeds all season and were complaining to their spouse about the weeds all season, but not telling you about it, and they tell you in round 7 or after that when they say, yeah, we're not going to go with the service next year, you can't do anything about that except make future promises. In round 6, you could potentially still do something about it. So I want to flush that out, solidify the work that I have for next year, and try and tighten up the routes even more. So I'm still going to be focused on a reasonable amount of investment into that round. Now, in round 7, this is where I am basically complementing the budget. Looking at, all right, what are we going to need agronomically? It's probably not going to be much because I just kind of kicked butt on round 4, 5, and 6. Now on 7, I can look at, all right, do we just need to put down a winterizer? Is this a lime application that's going to go down? It depends on where you're at, what you're actually focused on at that point in the season. But that's where I'm looking at, all right, I can slow down on on the amount of products that I'm putting down, I can focus on the budget and make sure that everything else fits. It's obviously there's more than one moving part at a time. But this is how I would weight things for what we would do. You should look at the applications that you have left and kind of see how you would prioritize and fit this into a similar type of pattern, just so you know, like, all right, if round 5 is really that important, how are we going to capitalize on it? What's our investment going to be into it? You know, where are we going to, are we set up? Did we already do our prep? Are our lawns in great shape? Because if they are, absolutely be prepared to capitalize on it. And I don't mean just like, oh yeah, we have a referral program. Our lawns all look like they're in good shape. Everybody knows, so we're not, you know, we don't really need to change anything. I'll tell you, you can always be better at asking for referrals. You can always be better at going after new work. You can, you know, set some short-term goals for the fall season so that, you know, hey, I'm going to keep investing agronomically into your lawn and this program, and you want some return on investment in return. You don't say it that way, but you got to, if you don't ask for those referrals, and be proactive about it, you're not going to get them. People always think, well, they have plenty of customers. So when we kind of go through this process, so we want to look at what's the soil telling us, what's our past history been, when did we get requests for cancels, and when were we able to get sales, and how were we able to get them before? I'll tell you that we used to do, so we, in the Northeast, we had our aeration and overseeding season in the fall. And we could capture a lot of new customers based off of that. The reason was that an aeration and overseeding took longer to do than a typical application would. It also was, for lack of a better term, there was more noise and commotion when we were doing that. Because of the length of time and the attention that we were kind of drawing, we would see more neighbors out there. So we would, before we would start, we would meet with the customer just for that application and say, hey, if you know any of your neighbors that I should stop by and visit today, I'm happy to do that and see if I can get some referrals for you so we can get a discount for you. They may point out some, you may not even get to talk to them. But the reason why it worked is, even if they had another company, if they had a competitor of yours that was taking care of the neighbor's property, they may not have aeration and overseeding set up as one of their standard services. So they could still have you do the aeration and overseeding, and then they're technically a customer of you and your competitor. Now you're on a much more even playing field to steal that customer away from your competitor. You can do the aeration and seeding there on the spot. We would typically only, we varied this, but we would never give our aeration and seeding crews 100% of the production value that we wanted them to accomplish each day. We encouraged them to go out and sell more business. So sometimes based off of the density of opportunity, we would give them 50% of the number. If there wasn't a tremendous amount of opportunity, we may give them 80% of the number. But that was a really good way for us to grow our business in the fall season, just because that secondary opportunity was there. And we could make a huge improvement just because if they had bare spots through their lawn and they were using another company and we filled in all the bare spots, who looks like they're a better lawn care company then? Even though it's a more expensive application, we are still in a very good position then to get that customer long term. And we could wheel and deal on the spot. If they wanted to pay for the rest of the fall and their aeration and overseeding at that point in time, we had more flexibility because we were already out there. We had already eliminated one of the drive times, and we could capitalize on that pretty quickly. So when we had our densest routes, it was typically places where we did that sales tactic. And again, there's a big investment into that. with aeration and overseeding, and we would come in with that fifth application and wowing them again, getting extreme germination, getting the turf to fill in, and really changing the overall look of their property in a 1 month time frame, which you can't do throughout all different parts of the season. So when you're into this second step of planning, you want to go through your nutrients. So you want to look at the nutrients. If you remember back on the other slide, what nutrients do you need through the entire fall season? So say that your goal was we wanted to put down a 1.25 pounds of nitrogen. How are you going to spread out that 1.25 pounds of nitrogen? Maybe you need to complement with a little bit of phosphorus. How are you going to spread out that phosphorus? And you know that based on how we weighted and prioritized the applications, that's where you're going to be heaviest, and you want to then start there and work around that to make sure that it's balanced and complementing. Any missing soil components, address the seasonal pressures, think about your application methods. And the reason a lot of companies do the same application methods, but also there's a lot of companies that will switch their application method based on the seasonality. So there's some areas where they have to do granular for the first application and the last application of the season, because there's still benefits, but there may be too many leaves down on the property. It may just be too cold to use liquid. The temperatures may fluctuate too much. So thinking of that with the application methods, or what are my granular options for that last application where I'm trying to be budget friendly on that. I may be, because of being budget friendly, I may be limited in what I can do. So how is that going to balance out with the other applications for the entire fall season? And that kind of ties into the budget as well. When you're doing that, remember, this is where we bring in the prioritizing, how we're going to weight things out. You want to have that total view. That second step is the total view. What's the budget? What are the applications? You're looking at, rather than each individual application, you're looking at it from a holistic, not a holistic, but the fall program in its entirety. And then you're going to prioritize. We're going to shift things around and make sure it's weighted into the applications properly. And then when we go into actually building it, we're going to focus on soil first, nutrients, weed controls, and then the additional needs. Once you think you have that, then you can do a final check on the balance and adjust for your budget. And there's always some adjustment that typically needs to be done, because when you're setting this up, you're starting with the ideal scenario, and then you're going back from there. I always say you focus on the budget last. I mean, I build programs every week, multiple times a week, for all different parts of North America, and starting at all different times of the season. And I always start with what's our agronomic focus and how are we going to capitalize on that? Because there's times where if you can capitalize on the referrals, that could be secondary to the budget, because typically when you have a budget, it is an agronomic budget. And then you have a separate budget for sales and marketing. Well, what if some of your sales and marketing budget was in your agronomic budget, because that's where you were going to be able to capitalize on gaining customers. And that's one of the things that we typically uncover is, all right, well, if we want to invest in this, we want to have the best looking lawns in the area, and we want to grow our customer base because of that, then what do we have to do in order to complement it and capitalize on that? So if you need help going through this process, I basically simplified it as much as I could. It can get very complicated at times, but I can help you with it and go through it. If you know your Holganix rep, feel free to contact them. You can call us at the main office. You can email me, even though that's not very visible. It's rmccoy@holganix.com. And you could also schedule a call through the Calendly link, which is by far the most effective thing to do it that way, because you will always get a call that way. Thank you all for attending. I hope you have a successful fall season. If you need to get in contact with me, I suggest scheduling a call, or you can email me at rmccoy@holganix.com. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.